My name is Jay Bridgeball. I'm a real estate broker since 1988. I've seen the good days, the bad days, and the not so bad days. My passion is to educate consumer about all aspects in real estate. Actually, I sold over $1.75 billion in real estate. Now, that's a lot of experience. I went through many failures, many successes, and I've seen many stories that you will be amazed. Not everything looks so glamorous as it is sometimes. On Let's Talk Real Estate, we will dig deep down and I will take you step by step through every process, from buying your first home to buying a multi-million-dollar investment property. We will have various people on this show. Lawyers, investors, we'll have mortgage brokers, appraisals, and everyone else to assist us to take you to that point. My aim is to break it down in such easy terms that you will be able to follow. So please join me every Thursday between 1 and 2, and let's talk real estate. Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Talk Real Estate. On this episode we have with us Jason Colatosti. Jason is the broker of record for RE/MAX West. And we also have AMIT Kandai, our co-host.
I'm also here from the team.
Yes, Jay, tell us a little bit about RE/MAX West. When you guys really started?
So RE/MAX West started in 1980. It was the first operating brokerage for RE/MAX in Ontario. It's
quite some time.
It's quite some time. So since then, we've expanded to 9 branch offices across the GTA.
Right.
With over 500 salespeople, active salespeople at the company. So we're still one of the top RE/MAX franchises in the city. And we're still looking to grow and looking to continue on with that tradition.
Right. I mean, I myself am fortunate to be with RE/MAX West since 1989. Actually, I joined RE/MAX West. And
wow.
No regrets. I've been there, a long time, and I enjoy the relationship. And a lot of top realtors do stay at RE/MAX West.
Yeah, so absolutely, and I just want to mention congratulations before we get started on achieving a very rare honor within the RE/MAX system. It's called the Luminary Distinction Award, and that award goes to obviously a very few. I think we only have one other person in the entire company that has ever achieved that. So congratulations on that award that you achieved in 2017.
Thank you. Jay, now the question is that someone brought the deal in. We as realtors, we work it through, we hand in our paperwork to RE/MAX West. What role does the office itself play? So what happened behind the scene, really?
So at RE/MAX West, I mean, the role of a brokerage is to ensure is really to protect the buyer and the seller in a transaction. So typically you'll find that in every transaction you're going to have to provide a deposit along with your offer.
Right.
And so the brokerage will hold that deposit in trust.
Okay.
That's a good first step, Jay. Now, realistically, so this deposit is something everyone knows about, but no one really knows about. So this deposit, when you provide it with the offer or after the acceptance, this is then given to the agent, given to the brokerage. How does this trust account work?
So the trust account basically is exactly what it sounds like. It's the money's held in trust, so it really isn't owned by the brokerage.
That's important.
Or the salesperson. No, it's not earned money for by any means. It's really there to indicate good faith on the part of the buyer to the seller. The seller is offering a promise to give their property over to the buyer on a future closing date, and in return, the buyer is providing a deposit in return for that promise So the other thing is that people really don't think about in terms of deposits is it also, when you go for a mortgage, when the deposit is held by a third party,
Right.
An unbiased third party such as
Right.
the real estate brokerage, it shows the bank that money has exchanged hands, at least a portion of it, for down payment purposes.
Consideration. Mhm.
Right. So if you had the deposit going from, let's say, the buyer directly to the seller,
Right.
well, that really exposes the buyer.
Undue risk.
There's a little risk, certainly more risk than if the brokerage is holding a deposit, and it's unconscionable. Typically, in our system, that would be considered unconscionable. But also, when a mortgage lender, sees that the money might have gone, the deposit money from the buyer to the seller, the red flag goes off. Was there really any money exchange there? Right. So that is also going to cause you potential problems in getting your mortgage, right?
Okay.
So the brokerage fulfills a very basic function in terms of promoting safety and in terms of every transaction for the buyer and the seller.
So it's important. It really is important to make sure you have a reputable brokerage that's handling these things for you. So that's a great point. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a very important area that these things do happen. So behind the scene, the money goes into a trust fund, stays there. If the transaction closes, how does the buyer is saying, "Hey, I put $20,000. How that money get to my lawyer for closing my deal?"
Right. So if the deal does close, typically that money is to be applied towards the purchase price.
Right.
Okay.
However, if the seller has certain expenses on closing or certain fees to pay, such as, let's say, the real estate commission, we'll not reimburse that back to the lawyer. If there are excess funds, the money goes directly to the seller.
Okay.
Right? So if there's money left over in the deposit account,
Right.
once the deal closes, which very often there is, we will disperse those funds directly
Right.
to the seller. Okay?
Okay.
If they need the money on closing, if that money needs to be there on closing, typically what we would do is get notification through the lawyer or through the seller's salesperson that they require the money on the day of closing or prior.
Okay.
And we make arrangements
Special
for that.
instructions. Okay.
Special instructions.
Okay.
So we make arrangements, so we make sure that happens.
So that deal get closes.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if we wind back to last year, February, time like this, the market was really, really crazy. Every home, there were about 20 offers. Property was selling $100,000, $200,000 above the value.
Yeah.
And then coming on later on, around May, June, when these transactions are ready to close, many deals did not close.
Right.
Because, of course, the buyer, we've seen two ways. You've seen it all, so we'd like to hear some stories. We've seen one way where the seller says, "Hey, my property have gone up substantially in value, so I'm not selling at that reduced value that I sold for." Result in lawsuits. And at the same time, some of the buyers, when the market comes down, are saying, "You know what? Hey, I overpaid for this property. The appraised value did not come in, and I don't want to close it either."
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, as the broker of record, I'm sure you would have seen some of these stories.
Yeah, so you're right. We did see a lot of that in the late spring, after, of course, the announcement of the Fair Housing Plan, Ontario Fair Housing Plan. Primarily, the big one there was the foreign buyer tax.
Right.
And so that was one of the factors that caused people to take a step back. And so definitely we saw situations where buyers couldn't close, exactly what you said. The appraisals weren't coming in. And so in a number of instances, what happened was, looking on the left and looking on the right, the seller said, "You know what? I know I'm not going to be able to sell this house to anybody else for the same price I got a month or two ago with this existing buyer or this existing agreement of purchase and sale. Maybe I will figure out a way to close the deal, either to come up with a vendor take back, so financing directly by the seller. We found those kinds of creative solutions on a number of occasions. We've even saw sellers who realized, you know what, if they didn't close, they weren't going to get their purchase, the house that they purchased,
Of course,
relying,
the string,
the domino effect.
Right.
And so they actually might have reduced the price of their house for the buyer because they know the appraisal didn't come in, and the buyer would not be able to close. It's just not impossible. It wasn't really their fault. And so we had situations like that, and we had a number of delayed closings. So out of the failed or delayed closings, not that many. You surprisingly ended up in litigation or in court. Most buyers and sellers, realized what was going on out there in terms of the market shifting quite dramatically, and adjusted.
They come to an agreement, really, because you know what, Jay, it's funny because we always hear about that, and then everyone automatically assumes, oh, it's going to go to court and it's going to be this long and drawn out process. But really, when it comes down to brass tacks, buyer and seller kind of, they gotta make an agreement.
They're working it together.
Yeah.
But what happens if they don't work together? Let's get into that after the break.
All right, sounds
See
great.
you back soon.
We are doing this event for the community. But what if CEO actually stood for catching every opportunity? This week alone, I've seen 3 businesses that shut their doors in this community.
Investing in yourself, like you have to know what your brand is first. So there's no other way that you're going to build a brand unless you network. You have to eventually get out there.
And it stems down to a lot of times not having the right knowledge, the right know-how.
Hello, I'm again here with Jason Colatosti, the broker of record from RE/MAX West and AMIT, and we are discussing a very important topic. What happened behind the scene that you, the buyer and seller, do not see? What really happened? It's important to use a very big company because they are brand name, and I'll explain to you why a brand name is better. Right? Jay, tell us a little bit about RE/MAX West and why really you think a brand name is important. I mean, they are real estate agents and brokerage all over the place, and
What's the real difference?
What's the difference? What's the difference
Or
between
benefits?
RE/MAX West?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. And so obviously one of the things that that a brand provides is some degree of credibility. So when you put your home on the market and the consumer sees RE/MAX on as your representative providing the sale, there's a certain degree of comfort and credibility that comes to you as a seller. For instance, the buyers know that you're going to be represented by a full-time, fully trained, a professional, and a fully supported brokerage and sales.
That's so important because, I mean, think about it. You can have anyone starting out a real estate company, ABC Real Estate Company, collect many of the deposits, and the next thing they went under, and
That's right. So, if looking at the history of any specific brokerage, the longer the brokerage has been around, that indicates the stability. So when that brokerage is hanging on to your deposit money or the buyer's deposit money, you would think, people will tend to feel a little bit safer, more secure. They'll sleep better at night, knowing that this company and this brand is extremely strong. Of course, RE/MAX is the #1 in Ontario for market share. Another one of the things about RE/MAX, particularly RE/MAX West, is as soon as you put your property on the market, you sign up and have your property listed and marketed through Remax West, immediately that information, before it even goes on the MLS, is going to be sent out to all of our salespeople in-house immediately.
That's true.
And that's a very quick way to get the word out, get your property up and running, the marketing of it, the exposure starts right there. Remax is international. And so we're in countries all over the world.
That's
and
true.
as soon as you list your property with Remax West, your property is going to be uploaded to all the Remax websites. And one special, unique website that we have is called Remax Global. And that website allows your property to be viewed if any browser, any language that is looking at your listing through this website, it'll be translated into that language.
Wow.
So if your property has been uploaded to Remax in English, but someone in Dubai wants to, or wherever
Right,
in
yes,
China,
yes.
they'll be seeing the information
In their language.
in their Mandarin or Cantonese, whatever it is. So that is unique, and that is very quick. Once you get your property up on the market, it is exposed, and there's like 100,000 Remax agents around the world. So you're accessing the power of that network is unbeatable. There is just nothing that even comes close to the marketing capabilities of Remax.
Wow.
Jay, the one thing that comes to mind when you explain this, it's one phrase. It's just peace of mind.
That's right.
That's really what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just peace of mind. This segment, I wanted to get into a slightly different topic in that now, what happened in an ideal situation, the transaction closes, everyone go home happy. What happened if the transaction does not close? Could you just walk us through the necessary steps? What could happen?
Well, yeah, so on some occasions, we do see a certain percentage of transactions that just can't close. In that case, if we can agree as to the terms of release
Right.
under the contract of the purchase and sale agreement, then what you need to obviously do is the next step would have to be litigation.
Litigation.
And so if it doesn't close, we are not able to determine whether the agreement needs to be enforced or whether we can just tear it up and make it go away. Really, you need to get a judge at that point to determine how this will be resolved.
Right.
Okay. I'm glad you brought that in perspective because at Remax West especially, we do everything to try to get that transaction to close. All right. I mean, I know we try our best to get that. In remote situations, if it has to go to court, I have seen many times the seller is calling me and say, "Hey, I need that deposit money. I mean, it's supposed to be released to me."
Yeah.
And I'm saying, "Hey, no, it's trust money. It's sit there until all parties agree."
Yeah.
There are many times that people agree to, "Hey, you know what? Well, maybe let's split it, half and half. Let's do somewhere down the road." Right.
And it's important you mention that, Jay, because when your buyers and sellers sign that agreement,
Yes.
and it's witnessed, that's a legal document at that point. So everyone needs to be satisfied for
Right.
that trust money to be returned.
Right, yeah, definitely. So it's not automatically released to the seller at many seller things.
Absolutely,
Right.
that's right on. There's only really 3 or 4 circumstances under which we can actually disperse the money that's held in trust on behalf of a buyer or a seller.
Right.
That would be closing the transaction as per the agreement of purchase and sale. It would have to be or a mutual release. So both the buyer and the seller have to agree, how that money is to be dispersed, okay, whether it's to be
Right.
returned back to the buyer or the seller or both. The other option might be, of course, a court order. So that would take a much longer time, of course, to resolve. So until we get an order from a judge, from a court, telling Remax West how to disperse those monies, the money will just sit there. It could be there for 6 months, a year, 2, 3 years.
Right.
It depends
Okay.
on, we don't really have that much control over that process. And of course, the final way to release funds from the trust account would be, by the regulatory bodies ordering us or under
Right.
their regulations dispersing to them.
Yes.
So the only other way out is to give the money to the government, the ministry
Right.
that regulates the real estate industry, and those are the options. Other than that, the money is.
So it's
is
really
there.
a very highly secured environment.
That's right.
Trust is really
You know,
a trust.
it really is. And Jay, you and I recently had a situation where it was a property just in Mississauga, and you signed off on the release. So it was it was a purchase, and we determined that I'll tell our viewers, we determined that the status certificate was not up to par.
Okay.
So when we determined that, and it was still within the time that the buyer was able to waive that condition, or not waive that condition, and get his deposit back. So in that situation, you sign off on it, and it's a very simple process. So it can be a very quick and easy, legitimate process, or it can be a very long, drawn out thing, really depending on which way you're
It
going.
depends on which way. The whole idea
Mm-hmm.
is to work together to get everything done, and that's what Remax West is popular about.
Mm-hmm.
We want to make sure that everything is being done according to their rules and regulations.
Definitely, solid
Very,
branding.
Very important. Now, another important area that with technology, we have seen that everything is moving to electronic, to paperless. What's happening in that aspect? I mean, I know Remax West has been one of the leading company in pushing paperless.
That's right. So, there are a number of advantages, of course, with digital documents and e-signature applications. And of course, we can talk about the number one would be efficiency, right, and convenience, both for the company as well as our clientele, right? So, it was a number of years ago now. It's been, I think, at least it's got to be 3 years,
Right.
where the government decided to pass legislation and say, yes, we can enter into agreements of purchase and sale for real estate and sign digitally, sign electronically. And so that allowed us to complete an entire transaction and all associated documents that we need to do, and all the stuff we need to put in our file, disclosures and so on, electronically, digitally. So,
It's such an interesting topic, but what I want to do is just put a pin in it, and then what we'll do is we'll get into that a little bit more after the break.
See you soon.
We are doing this event for the community. But what if CEO actually stood for catching every opportunity? This week alone, I've seen 3 businesses that shut their doors in this community.
Investing in yourself, like you have to know what your brand is first. So there's no other way that you're going to build a brand unless you network. You have to eventually get out there.
And it stems down to a lot of times not having the right knowledge, the right know-how.
Welcome back, everyone. We're here on Let's Talk Real Estate. Here we're actually with our broker of record, Jason from Remax West. What we're going to be diving into right now in this segment is really the digital era and how simple it's becoming to sign your documents and really conduct business in digital era. So, Jason, you were just diving into that aspect of how much simpler it is these days. And I know, Jay, you had a little story you wanted to share.
Yeah, I had a situation, one of my client, truck driver, driving down to New York. I had to sign a purchase of sale agreement. And he was worrying that, he got to go and pull over this truck stop and find somewhere to get a document printed.
In the middle of the night or
middle
whatever.
Of the night,
Mhm.
scan it, and then email it back to us.
Mm-hmm.
the electronic era is that I managed to send him through something called DocuSign, where he adopted a signature. The system is so smart that it tracks his location, tracks his IP address, knows that it's him. He signed off on it right on his smartphone with his finger. And within minutes, we get the document coming back to us, clear as ever, because it has not been printed and rescanned.
Wow,
That's the power of these things.
Absolutely. So it's, as a consumer, as a buyer or a seller, your life doesn't have to stop and be totally disrupted in order to handle, a transaction or deal with your purchase or your sale. If you're up at the cottage or you're at a wedding or whatever you're doing, even let's face it, just having family time, your dinner, you don't have to be completely brought offline just to handle a signature, just to review a document. Now it's so convenient and efficient, and it's really easy to use. It's unbelievable how easy it is.
Yes.
And so we've been doing it for at least a year and a half now with a bunch of salespeople such as yourself. They only use electronic signatures, digital documents, and haven't had one client say that it was inferior or that their experience wasn't amazing. So the feedback we're getting from our salespeople and our clients is that it's just great. And so I don't see this is going to continue to happen more and more. Eventually, I mean, paper will still play a role, but it's going to become less, just like in other areas of our lives. A lot of us are getting our utility bills and our bank statements. Everybody's going digital now. So we're going to be, of course, the same, and there's a reason why all other large companies, businesses, and government agencies are pretty much trying to push paperless. It is so much better for all people involved.
Yeah, the environment is better for the bottom line. It's a lot of different things involved in there. Jay, it's funny you mentioned that because I don't even walk with the printed agreement anymore. I actually just take out my laptop and they just sign right on my laptop, even because a lot of the times you're with them when you're doing the agreement. But Jay, do you know how simple it is to go show a property? You show it the first, second time. You don't have to go back home anymore. You go right there and you draft it up and they just make a few clicks and you have that offer right away. And in situations when you have more than one buyer or more than one person interested in that property, this is giving RE/MAX West and our team a cutting edge.
Absolutely. If you need to get your offer in there quickly and you don't want to delay the process or be, basically out of the game, you need to be having this available to you. And I've seen our salespeople go ahead and show up at an offer presentation, and the other side does not have all the paperwork ready. They forgot to produce, or there was a mistake. Well, if you're using paper, it's a much harder thing to do. I didn't bring a copy of this document. I don't have it in I'm not carrying it with me. With digital, you have everything available at all times to respond to whatever situation you happen to be in. So absolutely, this is a great system.
It's amazing. I mean, if I could take you back to '89 when I started, we usually have the long sheet and we will print it ahead of time, leave some information out, and handwritten everything. Right, that's how we start to do it. Then the first set of fax came out was the thermal fax. I don't know if you guys know the thermal fax. The paper come in a thick roll, and then it rolls out. After about 6 months, it's all the writing almost disappear. Right, and then of course the first scanner came out, where we usually scan one page at a time. Then a better scanner. Then I've seen the system actually deteriorating a little bit, where people scan properties back and forth, and you can't even read some of these agreements.
That's right.
Yeah. Right. Well, Jay, it's funny because that's the kind of the era that I jumped into, and where I thought, this is amazing that everything is digital, going back and forth. But after you sign and scan a document back from the buyer, then to the seller, then with the adjustments, then with the correction, you can't even read the darn document anymore.
That's true, and these are legal binding documents, right? Yeah. So that's why this is so important to get this done. In terms of record keeping, what's the role of the brokerage?
So, in terms of record keeping, yeah, we do have a responsibility to maintain records on behalf of our salespeople and our clients. So, in terms of a sale, an actual transaction that closed, we maintain records for 6 years. So they're all digital. We don't keep paper anymore. There's security issues with paper as well. Of course, we have to maintain those in like a secure area, and you just never know if there's a fire. That stuff's gone. If there's a flood, with digital, all the stuff is backed up on servers, and there's redundancy, encrypted. It's very, very secure in that sense. So we maintain 6 years. In terms of failed offers, in other words, if you go out and you're trying to buy a house and it doesn't work, we maintain those records for 1 year on behalf of our client, on behalf of the brokerage. So yeah, that's essentially what we do. Clients can call in at any time if they're looking for something, if they're missing a document that they gave to the brokerage, and request that. If they're entitled to that document, if it's something they signed or something they were bound to or were provided to during the course of their dealings with our company, they can always call in.
That's an amazing service. Yeah, that's great.
That's an amazing way of looking at it in these ways. Now, at Remax West, we pride ourselves that, an average year of selling over 3 to 4 billion, not million, billion dollars of real estate. That's an amazing. How you manage to keep track of all these things with 9 offices running and so many sales that going on and everything else?
Well, how do we keep track? Well, we use we have a very good staff. Of course, we have people that are that have been with us for many years, and of course, software. Right. So all of the transactions are recorded, and they're stored and organized, digitally. So we can access the information very quickly, instantly on any transaction. Now, with the digital, we can store them much more than 6 years. We are required to store for 6 years as a minimum. So yeah, we can. I had a situation recently where in the year 2000, there was a transaction in Toronto that we were involved in. We were the listing side and the buyer side, and the deal didn't close. And we were sitting on $20,000 deposit. This is in the year 2000.
Wow.
Okay.
So I get a call. This is a few months ago, probably about, last August or September. I get a call from someone, and he says, I bought a property. I tried to sell a property. It never closed. And, I'm just wondering, we were going to go to court. We were going to fight. We were really young. The buyers were in their early mid-20s. Everybody was very young and at that time, and they just fell off the radar. One guy ended up moving to China. The other guy ended up moving to Vancouver. And the seller stayed in Toronto and has never moved. So anyway, these guys came out 17 years later looking to finally resolve the issue, the $20,000 question. And they didn't want to go to court. And but we were able to find that. We were able to find the deal. Of course, the $20,000 had remained. We had tried to reach out. A couple of guys were, like I said, they completely moved. We couldn't find them. So we eventually gave up. They came to us, and we were able to resolve it amicably in the end. And that's 17 years later.
Wow.
So certainly, yeah.
It tells us about the
commitment
integrity.
to excellence. Yeah, integrity.
Yeah. What is also important? Everything is so nicely organized. For example, a seller that lists their home and find that within our system, we can literally email all the realtor and ask them back for their feedback, that we can manage to give that seller on the spot feedback what's going on with their property. Right?
Absolutely.
It's amazing to see the systems that we are using.
And Jay, that's so important, because specifically, a lot of the times the seller lives in that home for years and years and years, and they don't really understand that what they have the way or home set up is not the way someone else wants to live in it. So there may be clutter, there may be family photos, different things like that. So small little things like that, feedback are very important.
Realtor feedback is very important, and that's one thing our office tracks everyone. We'll be able to let them know what's going on and give that feedback to our sellers, right? In many cases, and get the deal done. So that's the importance of these aspects of the industry. No, you're also a mortgage broker. I mean, you've been a mortgage broker for a number of years, and you have a company called Funds to Go.
Yeah, we did a name change now. It's now Lending Logic.
Oh, Lending Logic, yes.
So,
right.
So, yeah, that's right. And 40 agents on our team there.
Okay, that's great. Now, market update. Let's take a break and let's come back and talk about what we'll see this year happening.
For sure.
All right, see you soon. Hello and welcome back to Let's Talk Real Estate. And we were just talking about market update. What's happening in the market? I mean, last year time like this, everything was selling out. There's so lack of inventory. Now this year, we have seen just the stats came out from January, and we see sales have dropped by about 22%.
That's right. Yeah. So we've seen prices drop slightly year over year from January 2017 to January 2018, about I think 4% on the 4.6, maybe on detached. However, interestingly, if you're looking at other property types, such as semis, semi-detached, they might have been up slightly, a few percentage points. In terms of value, townhomes neutral, condos I think are according to Treb maybe up about 14 to 15%.
Yeah, from last year to now,
So yeah, when you're looking at when you're listening to the news and you're reading, you got to break down what they're talking about, because different property types are and certain locations will have very different market conditions. So we're still seeing. Certainly in maybe the under $800,000 range in certain pockets of Toronto every week, we're seeing multiple offers.
Right.
Now, they're not going for the crazy, like you mentioned earlier, the crazy prices and the way above asking.
Right.
That isn't happening even in multiples, but we still are seeing a strong demand in certain price ranges, locations, and property types. Very strong demand. So what you're going to see is the very large, expensive homes tend to be getting, hit a little bit harder with the new mortgage rules and, of course, the Fair Housing Plan, right? This mortgage rules meaning the stress test that came in on January 1st. So, and we saw mortgage rates come up a little bit, right, in the last few months, that might happen a little bit more, a couple more times this year. We might see a little bit more of a rise in mortgage rates, but I don't think it's still practically free money.
Yeah,
It's still, the rates. I mean, you go back
compared to the historical average.
Over the 20 some odd years that I've been in the industry, I mean, for sure, they're still very, very low. And so you'll see that I think for the first little while, as the marketplace adjusts to the stress test, you might see we're selling a lot of real estate. There's a lot of real estate being sold right now. but we have about 4 months worth of inventory approximately. So, which means that, you know, if you think about it, 1 in 4 homes might sell, and they're selling within 30 days.
Yeah.
So whatever property type right now, our average days on market is 30 days or less. So about 24 to 25 days to 30 days on average. So if you go on the market right now, you may have a 25% chance of selling right away. And what's really going to make the difference is going to be, you know, obviously how you show your property, how it's being marketed, and, you know, so on. So if there's 2 or 3 other homes around, you want to make sure you get expert advice on how to stage it and how to make it look, obviously the price you're asking for, and everything has to be right, and you will sell. There's no doubt about it, and you'll get a great value.
Well, that's such a good point, Jason, because when you think about it, days on market, 30 days is still better than maybe 10 years ago or whatever.
Amazing,
whatever.
right? Yeah,
exactly.
It's amazing. And the market is not, you know, you might see on, you'll see in the news, some of them are talking the ugliness of the Toronto market. It's actually, if you look back 10, like you're saying, 10 or 15 years, this is a very normal, healthy market. It's a great market.
Balanced.
What we saw early last year in the spring of 2017 was clearly unsustainable, extremely unhealthy, bad for sellers and bad for buyers. What we're seeing now is something that's very normal, very healthy. I think that you're not going to see prices start to come up until probably later on in the year. But I think the housing market is strong in Toronto and the GTA, and you're going to see prices gradually move up over the course of the year, but not like what we saw, the 10% a month or nothing like that.
I don't really think so. A couple of other factors. I mean, the federal government is injecting $40 billion into affordable housing as well. Right? That will certainly have an impact. The provincial government, actually, with their fair housing plan, is trying to adjust that. The whole idea is that the regular people can afford to buy a home and live in a home. Right,
and that's very important.
That's so important.
One thing that I think that we can really take away from this is the difference in the news between noise and facts. Because realistically, when they talk about numbers are down, but there's a difference between numbers, volume, between pricing. So this is something that I think they try to scare people into thinking that it's a crazy downward spiral.
I don't really think that we'll get a downward spiral. At the same time, within GTA, there is population influx.
Yeah.
I mean, growth, and people have to live somewhere. Right, I find the properties, it depends on the area, as you say. For example, in Brampton, you got a property under 600,000. It's flying off the shelf, multiple offers. Right, I mean, so it varies in the area.
Yeah.
And what advice do you think we should give to our buyers? Should they wait? Maybe it'll be better.
Well, that's a good question. I never recommend that you try and play the real estate market.
Right.
As a buyer, if your personal circumstances, you feel good about your job, it's stable, your income is stable, your financial situation is good, you can afford to purchase, you've got your down payment set up, absolutely. It's a great time. I believe that, in 10 years from now, we're going to look back at what we're seeing today in terms of prices and
say, wow, it's cheap.
I wish I got in, right? Just like the way we think about 10 years before now, and then 10 years before that.
Yes.
And then, like you said, because Toronto is definitely a place that attracts immigration, and people like to stay in Toronto. We have so much to offer as a city, and we are kind of a bit, you can't go on forever and sprawl the construction and development all over the place. I mean, we have natural barriers, we have the lake on the south, etc. So there's only so much, expansion that you can do. So there's going to be demand as long as our economy stays strong. Toronto is a stable place for people to live, or the GTA in general. When I say Toronto, I'm really referring to the GTA. And so I think it's an amazing market for people to get into if you're ready if your personal circumstances allow you to get into the market, I would why wait?
Why
and,
wait?
continue to pay rent. I mean, it's really the financial benefits of home ownership accelerate as time goes on. The sooner you get in, the sooner in life you'll start to really reap the financial rewards of the benefits of home ownership.
That's great for our buyers, so they can do that. They can, at this point, at least you can negotiate a decent offer where you can do your inspection.
A balanced market. Nobody is pulling or taking too much. You can go in with your inspection. You can go in with your financing. Jay, what is it that you always say? The best time to plant an apple tree?
I always tell people here the best time to plant a fruit tree would have been 10 years ago. You're eating fruit today. And the second best time is now, because you'll eat fruits in the future, right?
Exactly.
So that's exactly how it goes. A very important aspect now. As a seller, we just talk about a buyer. As a seller, what should I do? Sell now, or maybe hold on a few months and sell?
Well, again, you look at your own personal circumstances. If you have a good reason to move, you want to move, it's a great market to move in. Just as you mentioned, you can go, you do have the time and the luxury of doing your due diligence.
Of course.
You have options. I think you're going to see more listings coming on the market for sure in February and March. So there's going to be lots of options available to homeowners, whether, if you want to move up, it's a good market to do that in, right? It's a great market to move up if that's what you're looking to do. If you're downsizing, again, I think that possibly in the second half of the year, it might not be, a bad idea, because as prices appreciate, unless something happens, that is unforeseen, we would think that prices will be appreciating across the board, so at the end of the year. So if you are downsizing, it might be more advantageous for you to wait a little bit. But again, I don't think the numbers are going to be anywhere near in terms of growth or price appreciation that we saw last year, no matter what happens.
Bottom line is to get it done early and get it done correctly.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the bottom line, you sell high, you'll buy high.
It's all
you
relative.
Sell low, you'll buy low.
Yes.
All right? So it's a very relative market as far as I'm concerned. And we will see this stability, which will be, as you mentioned earlier, it will be a healthy market. Much more healthy market for the buyer and seller. I mean, I could recall last February, you're rushing to trying to get an inspection for your client or buyer. And I mean, the seller is saying, point blank, no, you bring an inspection, you lose. It's so frustrating for our buyers. Right? So now it's a balanced market with all parties can negotiate properly. And that, I think, is great for growth in real estate.
Absolutely.
That really is important. So that's definitely going to wrap up the show for today. So I really want to thank you guys out there for tuning into Let's Talk Real Estate. And Jason, just want to thank you again for coming out here.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, you guys take care.
Fun. Take care. See you next week.